It was a Tuesday. Transfers always come on Tuesdays at Riverside, which means the block gets loud before it even starts. Women calling out to each other, trying to spot a familiar face in the new group. Sometimes it's a friend from county. Sometimes it's someone they owe money to. The dynamic shifts every single time, and my job is to read that shift before it becomes a problem. There were 3 transfers that morning. 2 of them I processed without incident, a 22-year-old from Bakersfield who cried the whole time, and a woman in her 40s who'd clearly been in the system before and just stared at the wall like she was already somewhere else in her head. And then there was Camila. She was 31, 5'4", lean, dark hair cut short on one side. Her paperwork said she was in for aggravated assault, 2-year sentence, transferred from Kern County after a conflict with another inmate. Nothing unusual on paper, but when I walked her to her assigned cell, 19C, she stopped in front of the door and just stood there for a second, not out of fear, more like she was taking a mental picture. "You've never been in a state facility before," I said. It wasn't really a question. She looked at me. "No," she said, "but I've been waiting to get here for a long time." I thought that was just one of those things people say. One of those tough girl lines that means nothing. I let it go. I shouldn't have. The first week, Camila kept to herself. That's not unusual. New inmates either come in loud and territorial or they go quiet and watch. Camila watched. She ate alone. She didn't make small talk in the yard. But she wasn't scared. I could tell the difference by now. Scared inmates flinch at loud noises, keep their eyes down, hug the walls. Camila sat in the middle of the yard like she owned it, just observing. What I noticed, and what I should have flagged earlier, was who she was watching. Her eyes kept going back to one woman, Denise Holloway, 44, serving 8 years for armed robbery. Denise ran a loose crew in C Block, nothing formal, but she had influence. Women gave her things, did her favors, stayed out of her way. She wasn't the worst I'd seen, but she wasn't harmless either. She had a history of intimidation, a few write-ups for physical altercations, and a way of making people feel like they needed her protection whether they wanted it or not. By the end of Camila's first week, I'd caught her watching Denise at least a dozen times. Always from a distance. Always with that same flat, unreadable expression. I told myself it was nothing. New inmates size up the power dynamics fast. Of course she was watching Denise. Everyone watched Denise. I was wrong about why. It was during the second week that Camila started talking to me. Not much, just small things. She'd hand me her tray in the lunch line and say something like, "You work every day," or "How long you been doing this?" Nothing deep, but she wasn't making small talk. I know that now. She was reading me, figuring out who I was, whether I was someone she could trust or someone she needed to work around. I didn't know I was being evaluated, but I had no idea what I was about to walk into. It was a Thursday evening, about 40 minutes before lights out, when Camila knocked on the open door of the monitoring station at the end of the hall. I was alone, doing paperwork. She stood in the doorway and looked at me. "Can I talk to you?" she said. "Off the record." Nothing in this facility is technically off the record, and she knew that. What she was really asking was whether I was going to be a person right now or just a uniform. "Come in," I said. "What's going on?" She sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table. For a long moment she didn't say anything. And then she said, "You know Denise Holloway?" "I know of her," I said carefully. "She was there," Camila said, "when my sister died." I went still. She didn't say it with tears. She said it the way you say something you've repeated to yourself every single day for years, until the words stopped feeling like words and started feeling like facts carved into stone. "Tell me what happened," I said. Her sister's name was Sophia. She was 26 when she died, 3 years ago. Sophia had gotten mixed up with the wrong people. She owed money, the kind of debt that compounds fast when you can't pay. Denise, back then not yet in prison herself, was running a side operation out of East Riverside. Sophia worked for her briefly, tried to get out, and one night she disappeared. Her body was found 2 days later. The official cause of death was a drug overdose. The investigation went nowhere. Nobody talked. Denise walked. I couldn't prove anything, Camila said quietly. Nobody would. She had people everywhere. She paused. So I waited. I read everything I could about her case. And when she finally got arrested for the robbery, when I knew she was coming here, I made sure I came here too. I stared at her. You got yourself arrested on purpose. She didn't blink. The assault charge wasn't hard to arrange. My chest went cold. That's when everything changed. I sat with what she told me for a long time that night after my shift. I kept going back and forth. On one hand, Camila had just told me, essentially, that she had engineered her own incarceration to get close to a woman she held responsible for her sister's death. That was not a small thing. That was a plan. A cold, deliberate, years-in-the-making plan. On the other hand, and I hated myself a little for thinking this, she hadn't actually done anything yet. She hadn't touched Denise. She hadn't threatened her. She just told me the truth when she didn't have to. I thought about Sophia, 26 years old. A body found 2 days after she went missing. An investigation that went nowhere. I thought about what it feels like to lose someone and watch the person responsible just keep living their life. I thought about all of that. And then I thought about my job. I went back the next morning and found Camila in the yard. She was sitting on the concrete bench near the fence, face tilted up like she was trying to catch whatever weak sunlight was coming through the overcast sky. What are you planning to do? I asked, sitting across from her. I don't know yet, she said, which I didn't believe. Camila. I waited until she looked at me. I'm asking you directly, because if something happens to Denise Holloway on my block, I need to know you were the one who warned me first. Something moved across her face. Not guilt, more like recalculation. I just want her to know that someone knows, she said finally. That Sophia's name didn't disappear. That's all. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But 3 days later, I found the shiv. It was tucked inside a hollowed-out paperback in Camila's cell, a piece of metal maybe 5 inches long, sharpened on one end. I found it during a routine sweep. My hands were shaking when I pulled it out of the book. Not because finding contraband was unusual, because I knew whose name was connected to it. I stood in that cell for a long time, holding it. I had to make a decision, and I knew either way, I'd have to live with it. I wrote it up. I had to. There was no version of this where I looked the other way on a weapon, not in good conscience, not after what she'd told me. I filed the report, tagged the contraband, and had Camila pulled for questioning. She didn't deny it. She sat in the interview room and looked at me with something I can only describe as disappointment, like I had failed a test she'd set for me. I wasn't going to use it, she said. Camila. I was going to leave it where she'd find it, so she'd know, so she'd spend every single day in here wondering if I was coming. I stared at her. That's psychological torture. My sister is dead. We sat in silence. The fluorescent light above us buzzed. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. What do you want me to do with that? I said finally. My voice came out quieter than I intended. I can't undo what happened to Sophia. I can't give you justice that the system failed to give you, but I cannot watch you throw your life away in here over someone who isn't worth it. She's worth it to me, Camila said. Sophia was worth it. I know, I said, and I meant it. She got 30 days in seg for the weapon. The write-up added time to her sentence. I submitted a note to the case manager recommending a trauma evaluation and voluntary counseling. I don't know if anyone read it, but before they moved her, I went back to the interview room. I sat down across from her one more time. Sophia's name isn't gone, I said. You kept it alive. You did that. But this, I nodded toward the hallway, toward Seg. This isn't keeping her alive. This is you disappearing too. Camila looked at me for a long time, and then, for the first time since she'd stepped into C Block, her face broke. Not a lot, just enough. I didn't know what else to do, she said. And she was crying, not dramatically, just quietly, the way people cry when they've been holding something for so long that the release doesn't even feel like relief. I know, I said again. I know. Camila served her 30 days in segregation. When she came back to general population, she was quieter, not defeated, just different. Lighter, maybe. She signed up for the counseling program. I heard through the case manager that she'd started talking about Sophia, actually talking, not just carrying her like a weight. As for Denise, she never knew the full story. She knew Camila had been flagged, knew there had been a weapon, but the details stayed internal. I don't know what Denise thinks about in her cell at night. I don't know if she ever thinks about Sophia at all. Maybe that's the part of this job that's hardest. You can intervene. You can write the report. You can sit across from someone in an interview room and try to reach them as a human being, but you cannot make the world fair. You cannot give people the justice they deserved and didn't get. All you can do is try to make sure no one else gets hurt in the process of looking for it. I think about Camila a lot. I think about the years she spent building that plan, learning Denise's case, arranging her own arrest, transferring herself to the same facility. The level of grief that takes, the level of love for her sister that it required. And I think about the moment in that interview room when she said, "I didn't know what else to do." Because that's the truest thing anyone has ever said to me in this job. People don't usually end up in here because they are evil. They end up here because something happened and they ran out of other options, or they believed they did. Camila came to Riverside looking for revenge. She found something else. I'm still not sure what to call it. Clarity, maybe, or just the beginning of something that might eventually feel like peace. I hope it does. I really do. If this story hit you somewhere real, hit that like button and subscribe. It means more than you know. I share stories from C Block every week, the ones that stay with me long after the shift ends. In my next video, I'll tell you about the night a woman asked me to deliver a letter to someone on the outside, and what was actually inside that envelope. You're not going to see that ending coming. Don't miss it.